No, I have to admit I haven't called for a lifting of the blockade. I also agree that a boycott of Israel would probably not be a very good idea, because boycotts actually, I don't think, achieve anything very much, and I think all they do is end up making the poor people, even poorer. It did work eventually in South Africa, which I think was a different situation, and it wasn't. It was
Zimbabwe.
It was a fairly international boycott. I'm not.
Iran.
I'm not necessarily.
Cuba.
In many of those countries, boycotts have actually had the effect of actually impoverishing poor people even more. If it didn't do that, yes, I would say I would have no problem with it. But I am concerned with the boycott of Israel may actually harm those very people that you're trying to actually help.
Mary, doesn't it come across as slightly hypocritical?
That's the point I'm making.
Does it come across as slightly hypocritical that you're not calling for a boycott of Israel, but you are not doing anything about a boycott of Gaza?
I freely admit that. I have not taken an initiative on that. I have actually, until I started this campaign and until I actually did the television programme, I had not received representations. I now know how strongly you feel about this, and I will go back and do something about it.
Thank you.
Can I just take a question from Ahmed, please? Well,
I mean, you're saying that it'll affect the ordinary people in those areas, yeah? Have you asked them that do you want to have boycott? Why is it that whenever we ask for from outside, when we ask for boycott, the Palestinians support us? So the Palestinians themselves want the boycott.
That's fine. No, I haven't had those conversations with them. Now,
How can you make a decision on this
you,
issue when you are a member of European Parliament?
I am listening to what you're saying to me, and I am taking all of this very seriously. I mean, that is all I can say now. I mean, I haven't done anything about it in the past, but I'm now beginning to understand just how strongly all of you feel about it.
Chair, can I just say that there have been various demonstrations over the years, many of which I have attended, and the entire body of the British public, including Jewish people and people of all faiths and all communities, have been demonstrating, including and marching in front of the Houses of Parliament for decades, complaining about Israel and asking for boycotts of Israel. Jewish people standing up in Trafalgar Square saying boycott Israel. I find it really surprising that any member, any person in the entire UK doesn't know that there's a strength of feeling about this. We've just seen the strength of feeling of British people on one child called baby Peter, and how he suffered, and the strength of feeling of the British people that because of this one child the sentence was not sufficient on the mother who didn't actually kill him. She didn't actually kill him, but she stood by. She stood by, and was not sufficient on the perpetrator of crime. This is the strength of feeling of British people. We hate to see children being murdered. That's it. End of story. So it's really surprising that our politicians are so out of touch that they don't know that the British public, not just Muslims, the entire British public are so enraged that children are being murdered. Israel was the boyfriend who killed baby P, and the EU is the mother who supported it.
Could I just react also to what's been said, even though the question wasn't addressed to me, and I hope it wasn't addressed to me for the right reasons, I assume. But basically, the questioner also put it very well to Mary just now under a bit of cross-examination there, when he kind of said, well, it's one thing not to call for an embargo or a blockade on Israel. It's another thing to do nothing about the blockade which you say is generally not very useful when it's imposed upon another country. So that does seem a little bit like double standards. And unfortunately, that's one of the things which I think angers people who aren't actually themselves involved in those oppressive situations. Chris Le Breton earlier described it as outrageous, and we have the power of speech here. I would say it's unconscionable. It's desperate. Yeah, words do not adequately describe what's going on there. The International Court ruled in 2004, as long ago as that, that the wall, for example, was contrary to international law. It should be dismantled immediately and reparations paid to the Palestinians. Nothing is being done about that. No further legislation is required in the European Parliament or any parliament, yes? This is happening now on our doorstep. We have Geneva Conventions and we have UN resolutions which are being flouted and transgressed. The trouble is that if you do nothing, and if it's too convenient to say that a blockade won't work, it's too convenient to say that there's no scope for economic sanctions. It's much too convenient to have an EU-Israeli trade agreement and say, well, actually, I don't think it would work to do the opposite. It's much too convenient. More like the reality is that we're increasing their credibility. We're saying that it's becoming normalized. They would love for us to go and visit Israel on holiday, yes? How normal is that? They would love us to vote in the Eurovision Song Contest for Israel. How disgraceful is that? So it's a normalization process. You know, I've heard Sarah Ludford, and I would not choose to describe anybody as Zionist without defining that term. It's a loaded term, but Chris wants to define that or accept your usage of it. I don't wish to do that. I simply wish to say that let's look at it just in terms of human rights. We have gross human rights violations. Everybody worth their salt knows when an injustice has occurred and has to be righted. We have a desperate situation going on. Right, sorry, lastly, because actually I'm getting rubbed up the wrong way now by Mary, because you said some earlier things and it reminds me. You talked about the Labour government bringing in the incitement to racial hatred. It was an incitement to religious hatred as far as I'm aware. Moreover, this government has been responsible for the most repressive anti-terror legislation, which has been damaging and harmful to race relations in this country, if anything is. We have all kinds of anti-terror legislation which has been misappropriated and misused, and we have stop and searches, and we can discuss that later if you wish.
Can I just come in? Just very quickly, to clarify one thing. Sarah Ludford is pro-Israel. And for me, that's what I mean by Zionist. She's pro-Israel. The number 2 and the number 4 are not.
Yeah. I've got a couple of questions as well. Some of those might have already been answered. And one of the ones is, how would you support a law against the religious discrimination? I would expect that from the two gentlemen on the ends. The answer would be pretty fine. But the question for Labour and the Liberals is that how would you go about when you are going to the EU? The second thing is, I think I just want to make it quite clear that when I hear for a sort of a Labour or Liberal bashing just because you happen to be here, I think it is just goes to show the strength of feeling over here. And this is what you are looking at is a lot more of the grown-up people. You need to go outside and see what the feelings are like with the younger members of our family. And they are, in some cases, you could probably call them extreme. And the reason for that is the extreme, inefficient, and I would say terribly carelessness on the majority of the ruling and the other parties who couldn't care less about the feelings of the other people. So therefore, they are inciting the hatred, if that is the right word. To go and have a sort of an uprising, and then only thing that they can find is, let's find somebody who will go and catch them. Let's go and collect 15 or 20 of these people, have these headlines in the newspapers, and then everything is going to go funny, and everything is going to be, after that, is going to be all right. And then what happens? I mean, you know, I'll just take up this opportunity of saying that previously 11 or 13 of these young men was collected from the universities and other places. And they were either deported, 1 or 2 of them, others were released. When they were captured in the first place, there was a big hoo-ha about what they expected them to have done. But everything then just went quiet. Nobody heard anything, no newspapers, no headlines. None of the major parties came out and said that they were sorry because they've done something wrong. And they should have done that. And I think if you people have got any sort in yourselves as well, when you stand up to be sort of voted, you must also stand up for those people who are voting you in. Thank you.
I think there was more of a comment, unless somebody else to come back on that. Okay, please.
Two questions. First for the Labour candidate. You mentioned in your early introduction about the French way, how women are not allowed to wear hijab in schools and public places. There are a lot of people in England and Great Britain who think that Britain should go that way, which is quite worrying.